This is going to be the most science-backed video for foods that lower your glucose. I've got 10 of the most research-backed foods that'll lower your glucose, not just in the short term, but in the long term. This isn't some sugar-coated, watered-down content. Every single food I talk about has legit research to back it up. Not small-scale data, legit research. The first one I've talked about before, shirataki noodles or glucomannan fiber. There was a study published in Nutrients that took a look at 6 randomized controlled trials. They found that just adding a small amount of glucomannan fiber in reduced your fasting glucose, reduced 2-hour postprandial glucose, but most importantly, reduced the amount of insulin needed to lower that glucose. All you need to do is treat glucomannan fiber or shirataki noodles as almost like a supplement. 2 to 3 times per week along with certain meals. It'll lower the glucose for those meals, but by lowering the amount of insulin needed, you can improve how much insulin your body produces otherwise, improving insulin resistance. Number 2 is red wine vinegar. I mentioned red wine vinegar because apple cider vinegar gets too much credit all the time. It's awesome, but what about red wine vinegar? Well, with this, we look at a study published in Food and Function that was an 8-week study. In these 8 weeks, they had subjects eat their normal diet with relatively high carbs, and they gave them a couple tablespoons of red wine vinegar with these meals. The control group that did not have the red wine vinegar had a 9.7% increase in insulin resistance. The group that had the red wine vinegar, just a couple tablespoons, had a decrease in insulin resistance of 8.3% in literally just 8 weeks. Number 3 is RS3. The heck is that? It's retrograded starch. That means you take something like a potato, you heat it up, and then you put it in the fridge. Something I've talked about before, but one thing you may not know is that there was a study published in Carbohydrate Polymers that found that RS3 starches, retrograded, are the most thermally stable starches. So what that means is once it becomes a retrograded starch, it doesn't get impacted by heat. So you could heat a potato, cool it down, and then heat it again, and it's still gonna be a retrograded starch as if it was still cool. Now, what does this do to your glucose levels? Well, essentially what happens is it can no longer be broken down and amylase has to slowly chip away at it. So enzymes slowly break it down. So that means you have a sustained release of sort of a glucose blocker. So if you eat RS3 starches with breakfast, like put a little bit of a previously cooled potato along with your, I don't know, your eggs or whatever, that can impact you literally throughout the whole day. Number 4 has been a hack for me for a long time. When I wear a continuous glucose monitor, the impact on my glucose when I consume just a quick glass of whey protein is unbelievable. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition made it pretty clear with this paper too. They took a look at people that were insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic. They had them consume a high glycemic, high carb breakfast and high glycemic, high carb lunch, and they gave them either whey protein or super lean protein from ham, straight up ham with breakfast and lunch. They found that the whey protein group ended up having a bigger insulin spike along with their meal, but after the meal had 21% lower levels of glucose. The reason behind this is the amino acids, particularly leucine in whey protein, are very insulinogenic, meaning they stimulate insulin production independent of glucose. So that means that the body was able to actually function and produce the amount of insulin it should be able to produce, but it didn't need glucose to do so. So it helped bring glucose down. So yes, the insulin seemed to spike higher because the insulin was actually spiking the way that it should in response to the high carbohydrate meal. And then it got lower where it should be. FYI, a lot of the foods that I talk about, you can get through one of our sponsors, Thrive Market. I went ahead and put a link down below for Thrive Market. They're an online grocery store. So essentially what it is you log in, you can sort by foods that have no sugar, you can sort by paleo, you can sort by vegan, you can sort by whatever you want, like super categorized Mediterranean style foods, oils, cooking, snacks, meat and seafood, whatever, super easy. But that link gets you 30% off your entire first grocery order, plus a free $50 gift whenever you use that special link down below. It's seriously like if you wanted to stock up your grocery cart and try them out and save 30% off, Like, I challenge you to see if you could actually get that same discount at your local Piggly Wiggly. I don't think it's gonna happen. Thrive Market is the jam. I'm not just saying that because they're a sponsor. They've been a sponsor of this channel for 5 years because I actually use them. They're legit and they're good-hearted people. So that link is down below in the description. This next one is wicked. It's actual omega-3s, not just the fish that has omega-3s. Because whenever someone tells me, oh, eat fatty fish because it's good for you, I'm like, it's not, I don't want to just go cook up a salmon right now. This is weird. Like, come on, I just want to get a burger and some fries and I don't want to, whatever. Point is that it seems like it's the omega-3, so you could possibly do this with literally an omega-3 supplement along with your meals. Check this out. So there's a study that took a look at fatty omega-3 fish versus lean fish versus a control. Ultimately, they found that the control group and the lean fish group, there was no impact on glucose whatsoever. However, the fatty fish group with the omega-3s reduced glucose, reduced insulin, reduced postprandial glucose. Okay, now what you can establish here is that it's the reductions in inflammation that had the impact, allowing for more insulin sensitivity. So what do you do in this case? Well, obviously fatty fish is amazing because you get the protein too, but what I would recommend is maybe 1,000 milligrams with a higher carbohydrate meal of good quality eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, maybe 1-to-1 EPA to DHA, or if you can only get DHA, that's fine too. But EPA seems to be better at systemic inflammation. DHA is a little bit better for the brain. Number 6 is flax, and there's a specific fiber in flax called lignin. Now, when you look at this lignin, there's a specific kind of fiber called secoisolaric irisinol diglucoside. Quite a mouthful to say. I even had to practice that one a few times. Doesn't matter. Point is, it's a very specific fiber. People think, oh, fiber is fiber is fiber. No, 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 no. When you get down into the fibers, there are thousands of specific fibers that have specific impacts on specific microbiota. With this, the literature is so strong on fiber in flax being very specific for A, modulating the gut microbiome to affect glucose, but also directly impacting glucose. I add fiber all the time, and I'm not even diabetic anymore. I was 12 years ago, but fiber is a huge part of my life, and flax is a huge part of my life. And my estrogen levels are not through the roof. As a matter of fact, they're relatively low, and I definitely don't have any phytoestrogen side effects, so I wouldn't worry about that. Number 7, quercetin. Whether you want to get it in a 500 or 1,000 milligram supplement form or eat okra and capers. Check out this study on okra though. So this study was published in Frontiers of Pharmacology. It was an 8-week study. Found that when they gave type 2 diabetics okra, they had huge reductions in their glucose across the board. Now the mechanism behind this is the quercetin seems to affect what's called PPAR gamma, which binds to a ligand that affects our beta cell sensitivity. So essentially downstream, you've got this flavonoid, this quercetin, that ends up making the liver, or rather pancreas, more sensitive to glucose response, so it produces insulin more effectively. Can you get this with a quercetin supplement? Arguably, yes. In fact, it would probably be more potent. With okra and capers, you get a small amount of fiber that has an added benefit too. Number 8 is monounsaturated fatty acids. And there was a study published in Diabetes Care that looked at 24 studies. Okay, and they looked at monounsaturated fats with a high carb diet or polyunsaturated fats with a high carb diet. Ultimately, they found that monounsaturated fatty acids that were high in the diet ended up causing much better levels of glucose, much lower levels of insulin, even compared to equal amounts of polyunsaturated fats. So it's not just the fat lowering it, it's the specific monounsaturated fats from like olive oil, avocado oil, macadamia nuts, macadamia nut oil, you name it. And that's probably because monounsaturated fatty acids also have polyphenols. They're not just oils with no nutritional value, and antioxidant effects that basically make the system run a little bit cleaner, for lack of a better way of saying it. Number 9 is fermented food or probiotic-rich food. There's a study published in the Iranian Journal of Public Health, took a look at milk versus fermented milk, or kefir as it's more commonly known. They found that the fermented milk reduced HbA1c, reduced fasting glucose, and reduced insulin. And it's speculated that it has an impact on the microbiome, and the microbiome actually creates glucagon-like peptide 1. So because it creates these insulin polymers and this GLP-1, it affects appetite, but GLP-1, like we've seen in the data with semaglutide, Ozempic, and all these pharmaceutical interventions, we see there's a huge impact on glucose. So you're indirectly, via gut incretins, lowering your glucose with fermented food, particularly kefir and fermented milk. And I saved the absolute best for last because this is one that is so underrated, and I've got a funny story with how powerful it is. We're talking about garlic or garlic extract. There was a study that took a look at subjects that were type 2 diabetic. They gave them metformin or they gave them metformin plus garlic. The metformin plus garlic group had lower levels of glucose and lower levels of insulin than the metformin only group. So synergistically it worked with metformin. But further down the line, when they looked at the C-reactive protein inflammation levels of these subjects, the CRP was much lower in the garlic metformin group than just the metformin group, indicating that the reason the garlic was having this effect was because it reduced inflammation more than likely, and allowed A, the metformin to do its job better, but B, allowed for more sensitivity on the insulin receptor to actually lower glucose. The funny story I wanted to end with is, at one point in my life when I was a child, we had 46 cashmere goats, and we went through one season where we lost literally 42 of them. We were down to 4 goats because they got some crazy El Nino virus or something called coccidiomycosis. Now, it was devastating. What we had to do is we had to take one of them to UC Davis to actually, unfortunately, sacrifice to figure out and do an autopsy what was going on. Turns out that this particular illness they had, all we had to do was give them garlic and it would have completely stopped the problem. So we gave the last remaining goats garlic extract, and guess what? No more coccidiomycosis. Point is, garlic is potent stuff. See you tomorrow.